My great thanks to my colleagues on the panel. Wonderful comments, and thank you very much for staying on time as well. We have about 25 minutes now for questions and discussion to any of the panelists. This includes our Esri colleagues who are in the audience as well. There are some recurring themes that have come up, the 3D and 4D, the human dimensions, unstructured grids was discussed at length, also in the Scientific Data Summit in February. The idea of sharing tools, also sharing data. Some of these have been on our mind at Esri as well. There's some new developments that some of my Esri colleagues may want to share along those lines as well. But let's open it up for general questions and discussion. And please, we have 2 microphone runners on either side of the auditorium because we are still recording this. So please raise your hand, but wait until you have the microphone before you speak so that we can capture that. So open it up now for questions or discussion.
Thank you. This is Kurt Hamill again. Dr. Halpern, you talked about sharing your analytics, and I was just curious, really for everyone, what has been your experience using ArcGIS Line for that? Is that acceptable? Is it sufficiently academic looking? What's your experience with ArcGIS Online?
Currently, we've been sharing things basically by the construction of the MGET tools and marine geospatial ecology tool set. So many of the tools that are in there are populated because we were doing a project, we needed to process some remote sensing or something, and so instead of just doing it internally in-house, we did that work for a project, then we captured the tool, and then we put it online and give it away as part of a package. But there are many other opportunities, and I think some of the new ArcGIS Online and other things might be other ways to publicize and share things. In this case, because this was actually some tool and software development, creating a well-documented, revision-controlled, downloadable package is the way we've had to be able to engineer that. But I think there's other ways to try to communicate individual tools and the usage, because I think a lot of people right now we're not really funded to do this. We do this on a shoestring, and as we think of it as part of our academic role of moving the field forward. But I think there's a lot more promotion that could be done, and get these tools out, and then get more tools developed. So.
Mm-hmm. Comment here from Rich.
I'd just like to respond to that too, because something that just occurred to me that another way that's we just went to a Python conference last week where every single presentation that was done there, every tutorial was done using this sort of a notebook approach, where it's just in a web browser, and you can mix rich text, which can include equations, or so you can describe the whole processing step, and then the code is actually there as a cell in your browser that gets executed, and the results show up below. And you see, and this is it's not unique to that particular to Python, but I think that kind of technology with HTML5, being able to have really nice instructional text, equations, the whole processing workflow that someone can actually take, and then they can actually, so it makes the science transparent. That's one thing, and reproducible, and that's another great thing. But it also addresses the share. I mean, it also is another step in this, shareability. You can take that and you can start modifying that and create your own workflow. And I think I could certainly see that happening with ArcGIS as well. There's no reason it couldn't. That could be another component.
Mm-hmm. I think a quick comment before we move on to the next question is the capability in ArcGIS 10.1 to package together your geoprocessing workflow, such as your model builder script, along with your data, and to publish that as a geoprocessing service. I'm looking at my colleagues Steve and Noman, who can expand on that greatly as well, and it's something that we can talk about as a capability that already exists in ArcGIS 10.1. So I think we're all converging on good ideas here. I'd like to also mention that I just got an email from Ben Domenico of Unidata in UCAR, who is launching with his colleagues a new data interactive publications project as well, because the point that Pat has made about when you publish your paper, publish the tool, publish the data as well? And how about peer review of, or the ability to interact with and perhaps update the data that you tie to your publications is something that is a very important development, and I think there's some momentum there, and those of us in the oceans community should most definitely participate.
Just
We'll tie on that, and then we'll go to Will.
Just one little follow-up on that. We've had some discussions with editors in some journals like PLOS One and other online journals on trying to move forward on the formal publication process of models and data and tools along with the papers. And I think there's a lot of headway there. And the real benefit there is to tie it back into the academic community so the academics actually get credit for it, and which is one of the things that's being lost right now. So I think if we can close that loop, we can really move the field forward.
And I'll mention quickly that Esri Press is on top of this as well. So, okay, finally, Will.
Thanks. This is a really interesting topic to me, and I guess I'm mostly interested in the kinds of geospatial technologies that foster collaboration, whether it's amongst scientists or doing sort of collaborative geodesign, stakeholders, and so on. And I think traditionally what we've done is we've developed geospatial tools in the desktop, and then analytics and so on, and figured out a way, or even just sort of nicely cartographically styled map data, figured out a way to publish those on the web. So I've gone from desktop technology to web technology. So we're doing that now, which is great. We're taking stuff that we built in Model Builder and publishing them as geoprocessing scripts and using those online. But I'm wondering about the utility of kind of flipping the design and engineering process on its head a bit and taking a more web-centric view. And thinking more about, instead of going from desktop to web, thinking about designing various technologies that would support the development of geoprocessing, for example, online, that we could then consume via the desktop. So I guess that's maybe a question for the developers. Is that going to make a difference, sort of taking a web-centric view in our development of geoprocessing scripts?
Comment on that one? Just I think one neat thing about, when you're in if you're in your web browser and you're creating this, you're just sending the instructions are going to a remote server, right, which is doing the processing, whether it's Python or ArcGIS, so that can be a really powerful server, and it can be sitting close to where you have big data. That's the other thing. And so you can be doing those computations close to the data and yet delivering the information and the whole scientific story back to the web browser. I think that's along the lines, hopefully, of what you're talking about there. Yeah.
So next, Cindy Fowler will receive the microphone next.
Hi, I had a question about how you portray uncertainty, and as I think Pat mentioned it briefly, but we've had a challenge been trying to work with scientists, and of course you're going to portray uncertainty, and then you go to the management side where, oh my goodness, don't you put any kind of error bars around that data, or we'll be crucified with the public as we portray that data because we're acting like we don't really know what it's all about. So is there, these tools or these methods or visualization techniques so that we can portray scientific data and uncertainty about the data in a way that we can actually use it in a management context? Has there been any thought about how we might do that?
Well, I have comments too. So
yeah, it's a great question. I think part of it is at what stage of the process you most need to communicate that uncertainty. So, and the way I view the process, and there's many ways to approach it, of course, is scientists are engaging with the decision makers who have technical capabilities to sort of ingest all the different types of information to come up with a set of solutions that are then presented back to the public or the stakeholders or the policymakers about which direction it goes. So the uncertainty could be in that first step in how it's represented and consumed in the analytical process, but doesn't necessarily need to be fully communicated back. Although I think my sense, I agree that the public often doesn't like that, but we are well capable of dealing with uncertainty. We have a percent chance of precipitation each day. I mean, people have an ability to understand this. So part of it is coming up with new tools or language to communicate what we mean by uncertainty. It's a probability of success or whatever. I mean, it's about communicating the ideas in a way that is comfortable to the public. But I think there's different steps in the process where uncertainty needs to be included and maybe doesn't need to be fully represented.
Just to follow on, this is an issue that we encounter quite a bit, and I think there's a lot of development that could be done to help this out. On the technical side, I think there's a lot of new approaches that could be used to try to tease out the differences between, precision and accuracy and error and uncertainty, which are 4 different things. And I think the public and a lot of policymakers and people often confound those all into one thing. There's lots of different ways to communicate those and map them out that I think would be useful. But the flip side is the dealing with decision makers. We encounter a lot of pushback from decision makers who, they for many practical reasons want to show, a result or maybe a couple of results, and just, they don't want to be showing somebody like, here's, on one hand it's this or on one hand it's that. And I think there's a lot of ways that the scientific community can work with the decision-making community on what are the exact decisions that are being made and how do you inform that exact decision. And then there are, I think, creative ways to map out spatial uncertainty and show it in a media that will be helpful for the decisions and not derail decisions. So I think there's a lot of distrust on how you deal with that, and so I think a lot of decision makers just decide, like, just give me one map, give me the best solution. And so, and I think it's, in the long run, that's hurtful. So.
I think there's another aspect of that, which is some layers you can identify what the uncertainty is, sort of like, show this distribution, but for other kinds of data, it becomes much more difficult to describe the uncertainty, and sometimes anecdotal. Somebody looking at the data has a story to tell about it, which informs you about the uncertainty in a way that maybe could even be more useful than just the numerics. And so thinking about a way, to capture that information, which is, you don't know what it's going to be, and sometimes that information is only learned many steps down the data recycling pathway. And so figuring out ways that we can dynamically inject that information back into the data set, or so that, using a sort of social media approaches perhaps, so that you could go and see a data set and see how other people had comments that other people had made on it, and maybe even harvest those in some, useful way. I think that's going to be, I know I would love that.
I think Pat brought up a great point. Working at a management agency, the best way that I've seen to communicate uncertainty is through a map. If there's for instance, a predictive map product, to also attach a map of uncertainty to that. It's a great way to communicate that, and it's really important to include that in management decisions, especially with respect to things like stock assessment. So it's important for us to consider that and to communicate that.
So let's see, I guess this is on. My name is Rob Fotlin. I'm with Microsoft Research. We're up in Redmond, and I just wanted to sort of contribute to this in the following way. One of the projects I work on some oceanographic stuff, for example, with MBARI and visualization, but I also work right now with Washington State Department of Ecology, and they have created a simplified map of Washington State that's cut into parcels around Puget Sound, where they are simplifying the result in terms of land use characterization in these small subunits of a watershed. And the point here is that one of the things that we think about at MSR is going from a priori presentation of a data set, how would I represent the uncertainty? Well, I'll do this kind of color shading or something like that, to some sort of a more of a geodatabase approach where the data is all sitting there on a server, and what you do is you expose through services the ability for a person to go in and dig out the kind of stuff that they're interested in, the granularity that they want. So you can present that sort of prima facie on the map, color coding into 4 different colors, but you also allow that sort of reach down. And then it becomes a question of how do you provide those services, and that's sort of an architectural or a computer science sort of design problem. But in a perfect world, you would be able to do that in some sort of OGC standard way, so that somebody who came in and wanted to know exactly what the error bars were numerically could pull that data out, or they could see another gloss over the map in a different color and that kind of thing. So I just sort of wanted to kick in that alternative approach. It's the instead of building a portal that, yet another portal kind of syndrome, building a service and working from services and allowing the person who's going to access that data to design the interface that they want. It's a difficult problem. It's kind of maybe next generation, but it's what we're very interested in.
Mm-hmm.
Could I just add a follow-on to that? One of the things that I think from a funding for improved data for the ocean that we could add to this conversation is a way to portray that the data are missing or the data are not high quality. Because I think we actually had one of our congressmen tell us this: why do we need to give you any more money for data? You have it all covered. There's data everywhere. And yeah, there might be some data, but I mean, in bathymetry, we go back to lead lines and some really old data. So a way to portray that in a way that says, this is uncertain, or this is missing data, or this is incomplete data, or not high quality data would be really, really helpful.
I think those slides that we show are kind of misleading. They look like the ocean is filled with equipment, right? There's hardly any water left. Maybe we need to, revise that slide and show.
And they're all in Monterey Bay.
Draw it to scale.
So I think we're all familiar with the fact that there's a lot of data out there that the people have, scientists have collected, that are unavailable, and sometimes that's due to the fact that folks don't want to share them. But I know that, Ben and I were talking earlier, that he's got a bunch of data that he's perfectly willing to share, but he doesn't have the resources to get the data out there. So just a quick thought, it would be great if there were Esri resources, servers where we could publish map services and geoprocessing services to get some of these data and analytics out of the hands of scientists and available for others to use.
Mm-hmm.
Just make a comment on that. We've encountered issues dealing with the Ocean Biogeographic Information System. We actually built a version last year to go on the cloud, actually got it on the cloud using free subscriptions we got from Amazon. But then when I tried to fund it on some other grants and projects, they actually aren't allowing the academics to use federal money to do subscription services, so we had to actually take it back off the cloud again. I mean, these are just ridiculous things right now, where the funders and agencies haven't caught up with, 2012, let alone 2013, in terms of where we're heading with the technology. And so we're actually stymied by, the bean counters and accountants saying we don't have a bottom line in the grant proposal to allow you to fund things for this thing called clouds. What's a cloud? We can't fund a cloud. And so it's really crazy when that's things that we're hitting the wall on right now.
Well, and to build on Will's point, I think Pat's an unusual example of someone who's himself and his group are really motivated to doing what it takes to get the data and information out there and putting resources to make that happen. I think that's extremely rare, and one of the huge barriers to getting people to put their data out is if they have to convert it into a new format or do anything besides hit send and send it off there, it won't happen. And so I think part of what will facilitate the much broader sharing of data is someone else, whether it's Esri or someone else, taking on the responsibility of figuring out the data conversion process, where it's just okay, here's my little drag and drop, you've got my data, and you take care of it and post it. If that were possible, it would, I think, really transform the way that people share data.
And to provide support for documentation or metadata when that data is hosted online.
So this is a great thread, and I'm going to chime in here a little bit, but my Esri colleagues who are out in the audience, especially if there's anyone from the ArcGIS Online team, please do chime in, because at Esri we are thinking about this as well. And one of I think the most straightforward ways right now is the ArcGIS online for organizations that are available either for free or greatly reduced rates for universities. That's one way, because we are actually providing our own cloud resources to help people get map services and geoprocessing services out there, but it doesn't cover the gamut for what's needed. And I think we need to have sometimes individual arrangements. So for instance, variations on a university site license that allows for subscription fees is something that we've been working on with UCSB, and it might be something that's appropriate for Duke. Just ways of getting through these various obstacles that are put up by the bureaucracies. So I think we all have to be very creative and sometimes just take it on a case-by-case basis with some organizations, which is why the partnerships that we were talking about earlier this morning are very important. So it's often not one size fits all. With regard to the metadata, the documentation that Lisa just brought up too, I was having a great conversation with Robbie over the break in terms of building on what has already been established in terms of metadata ontologies, those kinds of controlled vocabularies and services for these catalogs that we can kind of grab and use to tie into our map and data services. So you have the metadata catalog services as well. Robbie's been Robbie Wilson here in the blue shirt up front has been instrumental in doing that for CMSP across NOAA. And then we have some colleagues from the International Coastal Atlas Network. I'm looking for Tanya Haddad. I don't see her. But a lot of this work, oh, there's Tanya. A lot of this work has already been done, and we need to, excuse me, find out who's doing it and leverage it, reuse it. Excuse me. Can you turn my microphone off? No.
I just wanted to second Pat's comment about it being almost impossible to use cloud resources, not only from the academic side, but from the federal side. Trying to wrap brains around subscription services. And the other one that we hit is trying to wrap brains around data security. Is stuff only going to be held in the U.S.? And the whole sort of security accreditation process, and whether Esri can try to work with FedRAMP and some of the other federal bureaucracies to make things as transferable so we don't have to keep repeating all these, nobody quote me on this, stupid security exercises.
I just wanted to mention that in the National Science Foundation arena, there's a pretty significant investment being made into data management and helping to provide the support for investigators, particularly in the marine geology and geophysics, which is where I fall, so that we have a system in place to help do exactly what was discussed. Just give us your data, regardless of the format. We'll get it documented, make it available to the world for free, and keep statistics and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of synergy there. Where I think as things grow, we'll be able to talk to each other and share data across the systems.
So we have time for maybe one other question or comment. Steve.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of comment on your question about the ArcGIS Online and data and such. I guess there's a couple of different ways that we're approaching that internally. One is what Don was describing as using ArcGIS Online for organizations, and you guys as the authoritative creators of the data could publish your data through ArcGIS Online. The other way is that we are publishing data layers ourselves of sort of key things that are useful for a lot of people. So the bathymetry base map, the ocean basement, elevation data, an image map, things like this. So maybe one of the questions you guys can think about is, if the ocean basement isn't all of the ocean base map, what are the other key layers for the ocean community that a lot of people would benefit from? And can you guys agree on what those things are and tell us what they are so that we can look into those? I mean, is there a standard source of sea surface temperature that all of you guys agree we should be publishing on a regular basis? Or are there other things like that that are out there that we should be aware of or thinking about promoting? And, we want to look at authoritative providers, but there also needs to be some stewardship associated with those. So, we have things that we do through our community maps program for other themes. We're expanding the community maps program to include, for example, a hydrology theme. Maybe in the future we expand the community maps program even further for additional oceanographic themes. The other thing I wanted to comment on was Will and some others were making comments about analysis in online. We are growing the capabilities for doing spatial analysis and modeling in ArcGIS Online, and it is possible to use hosted analytics services from the cloud in ArcGIS Desktop just like any other tool if people weren't aware of that. So be happy to talk about any of that further in the next 2 days.
And Steve, can you turn my microphone back on? Thank you. Steve, thank you very much because to your first point, there have been some discussions that some parts of Esri have had already in terms of what might be some very useful layers to add on to something like the ocean base map, not burn into the base map, but to have as additional services. So I'll throw these out there because we would like, since we've got the Ocean Summit here, we'd like some feedback and consensus. So maritime boundaries is one. OBIS data is another one with the Ocean Biogeographic Information System and all of the fantastic resources that are in OBIS CMAP that Pat has been building, and he and his colleagues for years. So it's maritime boundaries, OBIS CMAP data, sediment classifications, like Chris with the DBC bed or through NOAA NGDC. And then we're having the beginnings of a discussion in terms of backscatter. A long discussion will be needed. Smiling at Vicki here. Guy Knoll is being very helpful in that effort in leveraging discussions between us, the NOAA National Geophysical Data Center, UNH, University of New Hampshire, CCOM, and then also our business partners, QPS. So those are 4 themes that I mentioned: maritime boundaries, OBIS, CMAP, sediments, and backscatter. So ideas, comments about that are welcome because we can come forward as a group with a unified message to the rest of Esri in terms of those additional layers. Human dimensions, we're hearing quite a bit, and others would be welcome. So with that, let's take a break because it's been pretty intense this